and welcome everyone to the 5G Factor. I'm Ron Westfall, Research Director here at the Futurum Group, and I'm joined here today by my distinguished colleague, Olivier Blanchard, our Research Director focused on key areas such as devices and semiconductors, including 5G naturally. And today we'll be focusing on the major 5G ecosystem developments that have caught our eye. And that is really the recent telco developments that relate to the spate of recent Q1 2024 financial result announcements. And so, Olivier, welcome back to the 5G Factor, and many thanks for joining today. How have you been bearing up between episodes there in South Carolina?
Busy, busy, busy. Not so bad. Here we are again.
Exactly. Yes. And with that, let's dive right in because, yes, we have plenty on the plate here. And I think it's a good idea to start by looking at the big three US mobile operators and their Q1 2024 financial results collectively. So we can, compare and contrast them in one swoop. Now, T-Mobile reported its first quarter Q1 24 results, raising its full year guidance and delivering breakthrough customer growth that related to a higher share of postpaid phone net additions year over year and matching its lowest ever Q1 postpaid phone churn. Now, the results were highlighted by translating customer growth into that notable uh, growth in service revenues and profitability, alongside also returning $4.3 billion to stockholders in the quarter. T-Mobile called out surpassing 5 million high-speed internet customers, I believe it's 5.2 million specifically, as evidence that it is executing its growth strategy by beating the competition across some major comparison areas. Now, Mike Sievert, T-Mobile CEO, emphasized that T-Mobile excelled again in the service revenues and profitability categories as the rest of the wireless realm saw moderated customer growth. So that's important to keep in mind because in addition to having these impressive financial outcomes, it also quite simply grew in terms of customer counts relative to the rest of the industry. Now, that provided the warrant for providing a upgrade in its guidance for 2024. And as such, core adjusted EBITDA, which is adjusted EBITDA less lease revenues, is expected to be between $31.4 billion and $31.9 billion, an increase from the prior guidance of $31.3 billion to $31.9 billion. Now, let's keep that in mind because next, let's look at Verizon, which also reported its Q1 2024 operating revenue of $33 billion, also up, that is 0.2% from Q1 2023. Notably, its total wireless service revenue came in at $19.5 billion, a 3.3% increase year over year. Now, Verizon Chairman and CEO Hans Vestberg spotlighted that the company is on track to meet its financial guidance and to deliver positive consumer postpaid phone net adds for the year. Also, its fixed wireless subscriber base is continuing to grow substantially. Up next, AT&T Q1 2024 results highlighted revenues of $30 billion. And that included 349,000 postpaid phone net adds with what it is asserting is an industry-leading postpaid phone churn of 0.72%. Now, tied to that are mobility service revenues of $16 billion, which is up 3.3% year over year, and 252,000 AT&T fiber net adds, which is remarkably the 17th consecutive quarter of 200,000 plus net adds. Now, tying this all together, John Stankey, the AT&T CEO, stressed that the Q1 24 results reflect continued strong growth in the company's mobility and consumer wireline connectivity businesses, which represent about 80% of its overall revenues. Now, AT&T achieves an ultra robust first quarter postpaid phone churn count which grew alongside consumer broadband subscribers for the third consecutive quarter, and also expanded margins in its mobility and consumer wireline units. Also, AT&T is delivering on its commitment to grow and improve the quality and cadence of free cash flow, which increased by more than $2 billion year over year. Now, this consistent, solid performance driven by its investment-led strategy gives AT&T now the confidence to reaffirm full-year consolidated financial guidance. And so what we're seeing here is a whole lot of guidance fulfillment going on, certainly across the big three in terms of the Q1 2024 results. And with that, basically setting up, the question to you, Olivier, what are you discerning from, the fact that the big three U.S. mobile operators are showing pretty good financials and that they're all pretty much spotlighting the fact that financial guidance fulfillment is something that they are confident about?
Well, I guess that the main thing is it's good to be a large mobile operator in the U.S. right now. What it also suggests, to me at least, is that okay, the slump is over, right? So, but
Right.
what I'm a little bit curious about. So actually, I don't have answers for you. I have questions for you. What? So first of all, what do you attribute this to, trend wise? And two, how do you connect the sort of like trends in hardware adoption, so people updating their phones or upgrading their phones, versus just buying more services or buying into more of these services and content offerings? How do you make sense of it?
It's those are excellent questions, and I'll start, I guess, with the trend aspect. Why are at least these three operators, showing these types of results? And I think it's a combination of factors. I think first of all, there's the macroeconomic picture, and while it's not, say, robust as many would like, it certainly is aligning with enabling certainly the operators to avoid those types of factors interfering with their ability to basically, improve their financial situation. And so that means that inflation, while it could be lower, is not disruptive. That means the geopolitical considerations and other factors, certainly, COVID itself, as we know, proved to be, huge difference makers in terms of, the financials. And so, yes, this is not unique to the operators. We go through, ups and downs, and obviously post COVID there was a down cycle, and I think that is, looking at the macro factors. Now, what I think is also important here, which is tied into your second question, is what are the operators doing specifically that can attribute this consistent across the board confidence and guidance fulfillment, and the other metrics such as improvement in financials, improvement in subscriber counts, and so forth. And I think what we're seeing is that they have dialed back their capital expenditure notably over the last few quarters. And so that's giving them a pause to say, all right, we've made a lot of investments, certainly in 5G equipment, 5G infrastructure, but also, in related areas such as, fiber connectivity build. And that is going to vary, specifically from operator to operator, the actual percentages. But I think what it's underlying is the fact that the operators are now able to focus more on, okay, can we improve the experience for our customers? That is, for example, using 5G on standalone and transitioning that to 5G standalone, for example. That's T-Mobile, I think, is a prime example here. But also, taking advantage of things like, the BEAD Act and other, acts in the U.S. that are funding fiber builds. And this is something that is kind of a rising tide aspect. So we're looking at it as a combination of, yes, there's the 5G dimension, certainly important, but also that's linked to fiber builds, which can augment a 5G service. As we know, fiber backhaul is basically integral to a 5G capabilities. But also, I think it's not great news for the suppliers, because, as we know, with the operators, at least in the U.S., taking this pause in capex expansion. It's allowing them to at least present better financials, but not so much good news for some of their key suppliers who are having to, basically weather through this drought of sorts from their perspective. So I think that, are some of the key, inputs as to, why we're seeing this consistency. And, for, the devices, Olivia, what are you seeing in terms of, how this is adding into the mix here when it comes to at least, U.S. Consumer behavior and business behavior?
Right. So it's there's going to be a bit of a reset with the hardware piece. I think it's already starting to start. So we're starting to see
Mhm.
the wheels turning a little bit, but it's going to go into full swing sometime towards the end of the year and into next year with hardware. So that's going to be phones. It's also going to be PCs, tablets. I'm not exactly sure how they're going to be impacted yet, but and it's all about the on-device AI, which we've talked about quite a bit, and not just because of the AI capabilities, but just because of the performance improvements of uh, of the chips that are going into these devices. So the chips that enable, well, the systems essentially that enable them to perform very complex and uh, generally expensive, thermally expensive AI processes or workloads also enable these devices and these systems that power them to handle multiple workloads and also really be really good for gaming and streaming. So I think there might be more demand even for bandwidth for at least or for faster connections. And so part of that is interesting. Part of that is obviously served by 5G. Part of that is going to be served by Wi-Fi 7, and so somewhere in the middle, you have this fixed wireless access play that I'm really still curious about. And you're talking about fiber builds, and basically it's wireless fiber, right? Or at least that's what it tries to be. And so I'm curious also what that looks like, because I think it's an essential part of this complete breakfast of 5G adoption and more importantly, the use cases that we're seeing in terms of connectivity, of screen use, and of expectations from companies and from consumers as to kind of like the speed of the connection, the quality of the connection, the amount of data that can be transferred to the connection, to be able to kind of get the most out of the experiences that these devices that are very advanced and capable of running very complex operations can deliver. And so there's always a sort of tug of war between the connectivity and the data piece and what the devices can do. And much of the time, it's the access point that's going to be the issue, whether it's fixed wireless access or really strong broadband, like really good 5G in a neighborhood, or fiber that goes into a router. Um, and evidently, what I'm hearing from the numbers that you outlined, or that you highlighted, is that there's the demand for services, the demand for content, demand for data is increasing. And so, yeah,
Yes.
there's plenty of ways to monetize that if you can be the best one to deliver it.
Well, those are all salient points. And yeah, I think you had an excellent call out there, Olivier, on, the device that can only perform as good as the network that's on.
Right.
I think that's common sense. And so I think at an aggregate level, we're seeing improvement in network capabilities. So that's a tribute really to, the hard work that the operators are putting in here. I know that they could compare it to the airlines, and that, to this day, they do get, a fair amount of blowback on, say, customer feedback. However, we know that compared to, say, previous eras, this is a much different ballgame now. But it's good news, really, for the overall ecosystem. And I think the one area that is worth a shout out is on fixed wireless access. What is, like the ceiling here? There is, a physical ceiling. However, the indications are that's we're not near, say, the potential limitations as we understand them today. in terms of being able to grow fixed wireless access, at least in the U.S., and continue to make it a viable monetization of the 5G network. And tied to that, I think are important aspects. And I know, like during the T-Mobile call, Mike Sievert took pains to point out that they are certainly keen on fixed wireless access as their overall proposition, and that is being also looked at a different light, if you will, because T-Mobile now has T-Mobile Fiber and has just entered into a JV with EQT to acquire Lumos, its fiber assets, to deliver fiber services in the Mid-Atlantic region. Now, this is something that in itself is good news because it's stirring up competition. With the offerings from the Verizons, the AT&Ts, also the Charter slash Spectrums of the world. But I think it's also representative of the fact that it's really targeting those residencies or neighborhoods that don't really have fiber, or at least not yet. And so this is something that I think is smart on T-Mobile's part, because they're avoiding some of the steepest challenges of just doing a fiber build from scratch, if you will. And so they're, if you will, avoiding some of the immense headaches that come with say greenfield fiber builds of say an entire network. And that is linking though back to FWA, and the observation is that yes, Verizon and T-Mobile are the two pace setters in the segment, and clearly Verizon sheds additional light on that, but also AT&T is making dramatic inroads in this segment. And I think there are a couple key reasons. First of all, FWA is integral to addressing digital divide in terms of a overall societal objective. Quite simply, as attractive as fiber can be, there's just sometimes not a business case for getting it out to harder to reach places. Also, in terms of why fixed wireless access, what we're seeing is that the business community views it as a vital way to access remote locations and thus help streamline, say, their SD-WAN solutions, and also just having overall ability akin to the digital divide to align their overall policies to quite simply have a way to not only connect the remote locations, but to do it in a smart way. And that's another aspect about putting up those FWA access points, if you will, is not too time consuming. Hopefully the line of sight is not going to be an issue in the deployment. And if that isn't, then you're up and running in a pretty rapid fashion, say, in relation to a fiber build itself. Now, we could talk the entire episode just about, the big three. However, I think it will also be insightful to jump across the pond and see what is going on with BT. And as we saw, that they formed a new partnership with the Media and Entertainment Group Global. And this is coming a year since BT's former enterprise and global divisions came together to create one B2B unit that's connecting customers in the UK, but also internationally. And so this is what I think is interesting, that as a group of standalone businesses that consume BT's core assets and serve diverse industries, its UK portfolio businesses, I believe, are integral to the fact that the media and broadcast services that focus much of the UK's digital content can now be more streamlined and linkage to the company's directories. And also, the businesses that underpinned its critical 999 service, equivalent to 911, and credit reference agencies. Now, why is BT making this move? Well, it's actually from, lo and behold, customer feedback input. Now, it's touched on it earlier. What about the perception that operators aren't responsive to customers? And I think this has helped changing that. First of all, these are based on letters from children about why BT was still distributing millions of printed phone books every year. and also inquiries from customers and stakeholders about the payphones, which basically are a standout, at least from my perspective. Whenever I visited London, there are always things that always leap out at you. For example, the cabs. The pubs, but also the payphones, the fact that they were so well maintained and, quite simply aesthetically pleasing. And so that, I think, was a contrast to, say, the state of the U.S. payphones, many of which were quite simply torn down or, moved on to having another application put into it, for example, a Wi-Fi hub. So what now BT is doing is that with global, they'll continue to market and sell advertising on BT's 1,000 plus existing street hubs, as they're called now, and upgrade them as they evolve. So stay tuned. I think this is certainly a worthwhile endeavor. And also, they're going to convert up to 2,000 conventional BT payphones and kiosks into brand new street hubs. So this is coming together. They're taking the new purpose-built street hubs and really combining them with the legacy payphones to make for a more agile network that can be more responsive to customer needs, whether it's consumers or, for that matter, businesses. And so, with this change of perspective, Olivier, what are you seeing about this BT move that strikes you?
No, I think it's interesting, especially in the UK with the iconic, red, telephone booths. And
Right?
it's been interesting. Like I'm old enough to remember phone booths and phone cards even. And so when I was in the French military, my fiance at the time in the U.S. and there's no internet yet. So the only way that we could stay in contact with each other was, public phones and cards. Buy the credits, slide the card in, just like an ATM, and that was it. Which wasn't super comfortable. Obviously, now we have smartphones and broadband and internet and a lot of different ways of staying in touch with each other. Um, but there is this infrastructure, right? And every time I
Yeah.
run into a phone booth now on the side of a gas station or something, it's abandoned.
Right.
It's like a relic, and I love taking pictures of them. But yet you have all this infrastructure in place, and you have some of these landmarks and sort of cultural iconic, um, little artifacts in place. And I feel like it's a great idea to retask them. And I think in some
Right.
ways it plays into this sort of not recycling necessarily, sort of like ESG trend of just retasking an item or a technology or materials so that you extend their life or give them a second life, and more utility. So I think it's smart. I think it's clever. I think it's interesting. And also it's a good play for British Telecom or BT because it's a good way to get their name out and have analysts like us and journalists talking about them. So
Right on.
kudos to them for that. Yeah.
Yeah, and in fact, that was a very instructive point you made, Olivier. For example, BT and Global can pretty much serve as an exemplar of sorts, if you will, in terms of how legacy payphones can be converted to something that is still very much part of the connectivity fabric. Certainly the Wi-Fi aspect works if the phone booth has the location, but I think that was a very good point about it can, in essence, lend more credence to a operator's sustainability credentials. Quite simply, finding a more creative way to take circularity up to the next level. And so, yeah, I mean, these abandoned phone booths need some TLC, quite simply.
Yeah, they do.
And here's, I think, something that I can point out as to lessons that can be learned and then emulated here in the U.S. And other places naturally. Again, the BT service is clearly international, and I like that trip down memory lane. Continuing that fine service while
Right.
you served in the French military.
Did, yeah. Long time ago. Clearly by the story I just told.
Well, that I think is a good segue into, what about, other operators out there? What about the competitive, landscape here? And so this is an opportunity to delve into Charter Communications, you guessed it, Q1 2024 results. And this is in the spirit, again, of intermodal competition. Certainly, they have an eye on the telcos, but, there's some co-opetition naturally. But there's still, when it comes to, reaching, businesses and certainly consumers, this competition between them. And I think that's well understood. And I think what was important from their Q1 revenue figures was that Charter reported $13.7 billion, which also grew, this time 0.2% year over year. And it was driven primarily by residential mobile service revenue growth of 37.8%, as well as residential internet revenue growth of 1.9%. So clearly, Charter is upping its game when it comes to using mobile service to quite simply bring on new customers, to be a competitive alternative to existing service plans out there, and also again reinforcing its ability to bundle, if you will. Certainly when it comes to say cable modem customers, as well as other services that they can offer. And also, this is tied to the fact that the first quarter total residential and small medium business mobile lines increased by 486,000. And that was as of March 31st, 2024. Now, Charter has served a total of 8.3 million mobile lines as a result. So that leaps out. That shows that Charter, again, is raising the table stakes and the level set in terms of choice here in the US. Plus, also as at the end of March, Charter has a total of 32 million residential and SMB customer relationships. And that is excluding the mobile-only relationship. So technically, that number is even higher. But it's showing, that they're executing on their strategy, that they're keeping a close eye on how to use mobile to quite simply make themselves more attractive. Now, importantly, Charter is on plan to evolve its network at a lower cost. And then what it's asserting is the competition to offer both symmetrical and multi-gigabit speeds across its entire footprint. So stay tuned. I think we're going to hear more about this in, say, the coming week. And I think that will be a key takeaway as to how Charter is quite simply doing this. Now, Charter's advanced Wi-Fi, and you hit an excellent point there, Olivier, in terms of mentioning, Wi-Fi as part of this overall connectivity mix, is a managed Wi-Fi service that provides customers an optimized home network. At least that's how they're positioning, while providing greater control of their connected devices with enhanced security and naturally privacy. And so with that, what's your viewpoint on, what's going on with Charter, and for that matter, the cable service offerings out there, Olivier? Mhm.
Well, I'm a customer,
All right. That
and
says it all.
yeah, and I'll tell you, there's aside from everything that you just mentioned, I've noticed that service quality has gone up, and it's always been kind of like a joke, and especially for consumers, I think more so perhaps than for other kinds of customers. Um, but it's always been kind of a joke of how bad Charter was, and really like everybody hates their cable provider anyway. But I've noticed an improvement. Noticed an improvement in the service. Outages are not as frequent as they used to be, and when they do come, they're fixed much faster. Even going to their locations to pick up equipment, whatever. I moved recently, so I had to do all that. Was much simpler, easier, more. I don't know. It was just more pleasant. It was less friction,
Mhm.
and so
Right.
I'm assuming that helps them, especially through word of mouth with other customers. Like, hey, it's okay to do business with them now. It's much more reliable, much more pleasant. It's fewer problems. But I think also, I mean, I'm looking at the streaming wars and the amount of bandwidth again, which is I think reflected by the numbers that we talked about at the beginning of the show, with the big three operators, that we don't need less bandwidth. We need more bandwidth. And whether you have, Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, Max, whatever it is, plus gaming, plus uh, people working from home, whether it's all the time or just a few days out of the week, Zoom calls. You need that reliable service, and I think Charter's, it has name recognition. They have the infrastructure, they have the locations, they know what they're doing, and so I'm not surprised uh, that they're seeing positive trending in their numbers. Like I mean, all it's kind of like a perfect storm of success. Um, no, seriously, it's like I mean, you
I
basically,
agree. That's why I
yeah,
thought it was a great description. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Above
If
average
they
movie food.
yeah, if they somehow fail to grow in this environment,
Mhm.
there would be, yeah, I'd be asking them questions like why, how are you not taking advantage of this? So this doesn't surprise me at all,
Right.
and it's just they're executing well, so good for them.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head with the streaming wars, if you will. This is certainly a major part of what's going on with operator strategy. Certainly when it comes to the cable operators, as we know, there's no let up in terms of cord cutting. Quite simply, more people on the consumer side certainly are basically saying, I'm not interested in the traditional cable pay TV package. I would rather do some combination of streaming services. Now, the operators can play a role in that. And we're seeing that also on the mobile service side, but also in, overall bundled packages. So it behooves certainly the cable operators, and they've been pretty clear about this in terms of what they're saying in terms of their strategy, but also conversations with them, that they view high speed internet as really the crown jewel moving forward because of what's going on with cord cutting, and also being able to quite simply improve their ability to address the business market, whether it's small to medium businesses or plus. And so as a result, yes, it is kind of lending itself to enabling them to come up with a better experience, both in terms of the service itself, but also customer support and so forth, taking advantage, and he pointed it out, of AI capabilities. We're seeing the operators tipping their toes in and discovering that actually AI, Gen AI specifically, can be very helpful with say customer support in terms of using natural language processing to better respond to the customer's needs. Having that built in is already showing metrics of improved response times, improved customer experience scores, and so forth. And it doesn't stop there. It's also BT is a good example that, for example, they're working with Amazon's Code Whisperer capabilities, again, a Gen AI technology, to streamline their ability to code. And they've already have reported, tangible progress in that regard. And so, yeah, this is all coming together. Like, the AI capabilities can certainly help the operators, let alone any large organization out there, to quite simply improve not only the customer experience but also their workforce experience, and that's translating into some of the main points that we touched on right here. And so, on that relatively positive note, thank you again, Olivier, for coming on board and talking about the matters related to 5G, not exclusively 5G. Certainly appreciate doing that today.
Sure, it's always a pleasure and a privilege to be on the show.
No, right on. Thank you. And naturally, there'll be more coming down the pike here in certainly the month of May, but also throughout Q2 and the rest of 2024 and beyond. And so, with that anticipation built in, I want to thank our viewing audience for once again coming on board and listening to us, watching us. And also, don't forget to reserve our bookmark, and go ahead and know that we basically are coming out with a cadence of once a week. And with that, thank you again, everybody, and have a great 5G and also Wi Fi and also Fiber Day, everyone.